Monday, 23rd August 2010, London. Police walk into a flat on Alderney Street for a routine welfare check. Nobody expects what they're about to find. By the time they leave that building, a mystery starts that 16 years later still doesn't have a real answer. But rewind 8 days, because that's the real horror of this stow, not what happened in that flat, but how long it took anyone to notice. No third-party fingerprint, no unexplained DNA, no witness saw him enter the building that final time. 8 days passed before anyone came looking, inside a city block in one of the most surveilled capitals on Earth, in a flat connected to an organization whose entire purpose is to notice things before anyone else does. This is the case some people call the spy in a bag. Officially, it's the death of Gareth Williams. He was 31. A mathematician from Anglesey, Wales, was recruited first into GCHQ, Britain's Signals Intelligence Agency, or a mind that colleagues called exceptional even by the standards of an organization built on exceptional minds. He climbed mountains alone. He cycled competitively, methodically, the way he seemed to do most things. In 2009, he was seconded to MI6, the Secret Intelligence Service, working out of London on matters that remain, to this day, only partially disclosed precise. Not the kind of man who simply stopped appearing. In August 2010, he did. No alarm was raised for days. Not by his employer. Not by the agency that had cleared him for some of the country's most sensitive work. Not by the system of checks that, on paper, existed to prevent exactly this kind of silence from going unnoticed. The question at the center of this case was never just what happened to Gareth Williams. It's how an intelligence service, an institution defined by its vigilance, failed to notice the absence of one of its own for over a week. There's something worth sitting with before the case moves any further. Williams wasn't a public figure. He didn't seek attention, didn't leave behind interviews or public statements, didn't build the kind of visible life that makes a disappearance obvious to the outside world. He built a private one, deliberately climbed mountains alone, cycled distances alone, a career that, by design, kept most of what he did out of view. That was the job. That was also, in the end, part of what let 8 days pass unnoticed. It's a strange kind of irony the case never quite lets go of. A man trained to notice what others miss, missed by everyone whose job it was to notice him. The flat was not simply his home. It was, in the language investigators later used, MI6 associated accommodation, a residence tied to the machinery of the agency itself, not a private lease negotiated on the open market like any other flat in Pimlico. That distinction matters. A private death in a private home raises private questions. A death inside a property connected to Britain's Foreign Intelligence Service raises institutional ones about access, about oversight, about who else might have held a key, and about what standard of accountability applies when the address itself belongs, in some functional sense, to the state. Neighbors noticed little. The building gave no outward sign that anything inside had gone wrong. By every account, Williams seemed settled and content, even in a quiet rhythm of work and solitary pursuits. Here is the detail this film keeps circling back to. Whatever happened inside that flat during the first weeks of August 2010 went undetected by every mechanism that was supposed to catch it. Not the neighbors, not the building, not the agency that owned the lease. Hold two facts side by side. First, this was meant to be secure accommodation, tied to an agency whose entire operational identity rests on control of information, of access, of risk. Second, none of that control registered anything wrong until it was far too late to matter. Inside, eventually, investigators would find a bag. Red, zipped, padlocked from the outside. What it contained would not be fully understood, not even years later, in a way that satisfied everyone who examined it. The gap between Safe House and what actually happened at 36 Alderney Street is where this case stops being simple. By 23rd August 2010, Williams hadn't been seen or heard from for long enough that a welfare check was authorized. Police entered the flat. What they found didn't immediately read as a crime scene, and it didn't immediately read as anything else either. In the bath, inside a large red North Face holdall, was a body. The bag was padlocked shut from the outside. Officers worked the scene the way such scenes demand, cataloging before touching, photographing before moving, treating every object as evidence before anyone knew what it meant. No signs of forced entry, no obvious struggle, no note. Estimates placed the time of death roughly a week before discovery. For the better part of 7 days, an intelligence officer with active security clearance had been missing from his post, and no one at any level of the organization he worked for had escalated that absence into the emergency it already was. One question sat at the center of everything that followed. How does a person end up inside a locked bag, in a bath, with the lock closed from the outside, and what does that fact actually prove? It would take investigators years to even partially answer it. And in the end, 2 separate official bodies would answer it in exactly opposite directions. Here is what could actually be said, based only on what was documented at the scene. There was a body, a bag, a lock, and no one left who could explain firsthand how those 3 things came together. Motive. Method. Whether a second person had ever been in that room. All of it, at this stage, is unknown. One mechanical question consumed the forensic investigation. Could Gareth Williams have locked himself inside that bag without help? On its face, the padlock argues against him. A lock secured from the outside, after someone is already inside, isn't naturally consistent with a person sealing themselves in alone. But the inquest complicated that reading. Expert witnesses testified that, under rare and specific conditions, a flexible, trained individual with prior practice could manipulate a lock like this one from inside the bag itself. That testimony didn't resolve the question. It cracked it open. Then came the forensic gap. No third-party DNA. No identifiable third-party fingerprints on the padlock, not on the bag, not anywhere at the scene. In a different case, that absence might argue against outside involvement entirely. But the absence of a trace isn't proof of the absence of a person. Gloves. Careful handling. A week of decomposition before discovery. Any of these could explain it, and the inquest treated the gap exactly that way, as an absence, not a verdict. More details were entered into the record, each one cutting against the last. No keys to the padlock were found inside the bag. Investigators questioned whether Williams could even have reached the bag's exterior to lock it from within. And pathologists never reached a definitive cause of death. They listed it as unascertained, most likely suffocation or asphyxiation, worsened by heat and the enclosed conditions of a padlocked bag inside a bath. The lock points one way. The missing forensic trace points to another. The physical difficulty of self-locking complicates both without ruling out either. This isn't a case where the facts were withheld for effect. It's a case where the forensic record itself was tested by pathologists, argued by expert witnesses under oath, weighed by a coroner, never producing one clean, mechanically confirmed answer to the most basic question the scene demanded. How did he get in, and how did the bag get locked? That single unanswered mechanism carries the entire case on its back. Every conclusion that followed in 2012 and again in 2013 was built on top of it without ever fully resolving it. One locked bag, 2 official conclusions delivered a year apart that couldn't both be right. In May 2012, coroner Dr. Fiona Wilcox delivered the inquest's finding: unlawful killing of Williams' death, in her words, criminally mediated by a third party, on the balance of probabilities. What that verdict does and doesn't do matters just as much as the words themselves. It's a formal legal determination, not a criminal conviction, since no one had been charged. Built on weeks of testimony, it concluded that someone else was, more likely than not, involved in Williams' death and in the securing of the bag. The inquest went further than the forensics. It scrutinized MI6 itself, how long it took the agency to treat Williams' silence as urgent, and why an organization built to detect anomalies had missed the most immediate anomaly imaginable. One of its own, gone quiet for the better part of a week. For Williams' family, the verdict gave them something the flat itself never had: an official acknowledgement that something had been done to him, rather than something he had done to himself. But a verdict isn't the end of an investigation. It's a legal determination reached under a specific standard of a balance of probabilities, not the higher criminal bar of beyond a reasonable doubt. The Metropolitan Police, who'd led the original case, didn't close their file when the inquest did. They went back in. Same mechanical questions, same forensic gaps, same locked bag, and within a year, they landed somewhere completely different. In October 2013, the Metropolitan Police released the findings of an extensive review, one that reportedly drew on input from the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit. Their conclusion didn't just differ from the coroner's, it reversed it. On the balance of probabilities they now assessed, Williams' death was likely an accident, with no significant evidence anyone else had been involved. What changed their minds wasn't new forensics from the scene, it was context. Investigators pointed to items recovered from the flat. In the original search, women's clothing, wigs, and material connected to bondage and escapology. They cross-referenced Williams' case against others involving people who died in similarly enclosed, self-restrictive circumstances, tied to solo escapology, or extreme risk-taking cases where no third party had ever been found responsible. Under this new theory, the padlock stopped being proof of someone else in the room. It became consistent with a rare practiced skill, a trained individual, drawing on prior experience with restraint in confined spaces, sealing himself into the bag deliberately, and something going fatally wrong before he could reverse it. The 2013 review never claimed certainty. It stated a revised probability built on a wider base of evidence than the 2012 inquest had access to. More witness accounts, deeper behavioral analysis, and closer scrutiny of what was actually found in that flat. What makes this reversal worth pausing on isn't that police disagreed with the CEO. Owner, that alone isn't unusual. What's unusual is that both conclusions were reached in the same way. Same standard. Same evidence, largely. And still, two institutions looked at it and arrived at opposite explanations for how a man ended up dead inside a locked bag. No confessions surfaced in either investigation. No eyewitness ever came forward. Between 2012 and 2013, the evidence at the scene didn't change. What changed was who was weighing it, and under what mandate. The 2012 verdict and the 2013 reversal agree on almost nothing, but neither one required MI6 to explain the missing week. The agency has never fully accounted for why the sustained absence of one of its own officers went unreported for the better part of a week inside an organization whose entire function is monitoring, verifying, and acting on the smallest anomalies. The inquest raised this directly. The coroner criticized MI6's handling of Williams' disappearance and the delay before anyone treated his silence as urgent. That criticism is on the record. The 2013 review never revisited it. MI6 has never answered it in public, nor has the full scope of Williams' professional access to what he actually worked on. What sensitive material passed through his hands in the weeks before his death ever been placed fully into the public record. Parts of his work were withheld from the inquest itself, protected under standard intelligence sensitivity restrictions. That leaves a portion of this case permanently outside public scrutiny, regardless of which theory of his death turns out to be true, and that's the asymmetry at the center of everything. The padlock got a mechanical answer tested twice, by two institutions in public on the record. The missing week got one line of criticism from a coroner, and no institutional answer at all. An intelligence officer living inside a flat connected to his own agency was silent for roughly a week before anyone treated that silence as urgent. MI6 has still never explained why a gap exists, no matter which theory of his death turns out to be correct. For Williams' family, that gap isn't an abstraction. It's the difference between an institution that failed their son for a week and one that has never had to answer for it publicly since. Whichever verdict they believe is unlawful killing or a tragic accident, the silence around those 8 days belongs to neither theory. It belongs to MI6 alone, and it has outlasted both official conclusions by well over a decade. No one has ever been charged in connection with the death of Gareth Williams. The official classification, following the 2013 Metropolitan Police review, is unnatural death, likely accidental, a phrase that resolves almost nothing, so much as it documents the limits of what could ever be proven. Not innocent, not guilty, not solved, likely. Williams' family has publicly rejected that conclusion. They maintain that the accidental death theory still doesn't explain the padlock, the missing key, or the mechanics of the scene as it was first documented. The coroner's 2012 verdict of unlawful killing has never been overturned. No jury weighed it, no court reviewed it a second time. It simply sits next to the 2013 police conclusion, two official determinations from two different institutions looking at the same body, the same bag, the same locked flat, and reaching conclusions that cannot both be fully true. Nothing has closed this case, not a conviction, not a confession. Not one piece of evidence is strong enough to make either explanation the final word. Unnatural death. Likely accidental. That's where the file officially sits, a case built entirely on probability, never certainty, left open long enough that 2 generations of investigators have now taken a turn trying to close it and failed. Every person who reaches the end of this story tends to land somewhere different. Some convinced by the padlock, some by the wigs and the escapology, some by neither, still stuck on the 8 days nobody explains. That disagreement isn't a flaw in the case. It's the case. Gareth Williams' file has sat open for over a decade, specifically because no explanation has ever been strong enough to make everyone else's theory go away. It's the kind of file, in other words, that doesn't stay closed for long in the news, in the archives, or in the mind of whoever just went looking into it.